We're now going to take a brief look at the concept of a 3-point lighting. And on the right, we have a wizard character girl that I created, and on the left, we have a single point lit source sphere. Now, you already basically know a lot of the 3-point lighting principles because we've kind of gone through it already. But I wanted to go over this again just in a little bit of a different way and use the term 3-point lighting to help you realize how important 3-point lighting can be when it comes to creating a really believable and a really appealing 3D look in your work. Now, you're always going to have at least one light source on your work unless you're doing a very simplistic coloring style where there really aren't any clear light sources. It's more of a graphic style and less of a realist lighting or formed type of style. Okay. Now, beginners tend to generally always only use one light source at the start. They think to themselves, all right, this 3D object is lit, so there must be an area that is lit and an area that has shadow, and that's all I'm ever going to do. And whilst that's not necessarily untrue if there is a single light source, when this is done in all the work, the thing, the object, or the characters that they're painting or rendering seem to be very flat, right? They seem to be very boring. And this is where the wonder of 3-point lighting comes into play. So on the left-hand side, we have our sphere, and it is currently lit from just one side, the top left. What we're going to do is we're going to introduce a blue light on the right-hand side, and we're going to introduce a reflected light on the bottom. Like I said, nothing you haven't typically seen before, but we're going to take a little bit of a twist when we look at this, and we're also going to use our wizard character Kami on the right to illustrate how effective 3-point lighting can be. Now, 3-point lighting is called such because we have our key light, which is our main light, our secondary light, which is going to be our blue light, and then our reflected light at the bottom, which is going to be our tertiary light. And so we have 1, 2, 3-point lighting. So let's get into that, and we're going to quickly add in these lights. So I'm going to use a similar blue that is on Kami. It's kind of a bright colored blue. Using the soft brush to do this, and we're gently going to add in this secondary light source here. And note how I make sure that it's certainly a lot brighter near the edges, and I can actually increase the hue and the value a little bit there at the very brightest points of the light. All right, and we've now introduced our secondary light source, and you can also see in the thumbnail view that it kind of increases that 3D read quite significantly. All right, and now let's go ahead and add in our reflected light. I'm going to just make this maybe a very light but more dull color. It's going to be a high value sort of gray in the greeny kind of range. And the reason is we don't want to have competing value levels, or we don't want to have symmetry, if you will, between the values of the secondary light source and the reflected light source. Also keeping in mind that our reflected light generally only appears in the shadows, right, in our work. So we want to kind of keep it not too bright, not too light. In fact, I actually think we should take that shadow value, ramp it steps up a little bit, but not too much. And then we can move into that greeny gray range. We can actually give it a bit of a test here and see. And that seems reasonably good for a reflected light source. We don't want to make it too bright. All right. And so what we have is a significantly more three-dimensional looking sphere because we've lit it from 3 points. Of course, we can further enhance it with a highlight and so forth. That's not necessary for this particular example. Now, if we go and take a look at Kami, and let's zoom in here a bit, take a look at her face, for example, we will notice that she is indeed a victim, if you will, of 3-point lighting, making her look more dynamic and more three-dimensional than she would otherwise look without the lighting. And so we can see that on the left-hand side of her, she's got a key light. Let's just change the brush there. She's got a key light, and she's got a secondary light on the left-hand side of her. Our key light shows itself here in the highlight of her nose, and the way the light kind of the value increases on her forehead. In terms of her jewelry and the trimmings of her clothes, her scarf, you can see the impact of that key light on the base value, the local color of the objects that the light is shining on. And so it's the same on her gloves and so on and so forth. There is a definite key light in the scene, and that gives her a good sense of 3D, and of course the shadows reinforce that key light location. Next, we have the secondary light, which shines almost in a repeating pattern, if you will, of dark light for the most part, where there is light, then there isn't, then there is light, then there isn't, on areas that that secondary light is hitting. So for example, we see here it's hitting the top of the hat, then it doesn't hit, then it hits again, probably doesn't hit again, it hits here, but it doesn't hit there, hits here, that doesn't hit there, it hits a little bit here, and we're kind of going to reflected lighting there, and we can see here how that blue light is shining on her hair, on the side of her face, right, on her lip a little bit, in her eyes even, on the inside of her eye socket. You can kind of see how that secondary light is enhancing the three-dimensionality of her, all right? So three-point lighting is great for this dynamic effect. Here on the gloves. Now, keep in mind as well, when you are doing secondary lighting, try to have it fade as naturally as you can from the edge into the form, and obviously be logical about the planes. Also, don't draw solid straight lines of the secondary light just kind of beaming in a solid straight line like this. Don't do something like this where it just keeps going, because you want to break the light up. It looks more natural. If you look around you, even right now, look at elements in your room, you will notice light generally follows a pattern of lit area, shadowed area, lit area, shadowed area, lit area, shadowed area, whether it's in a macro sense or a micro sense. Nevertheless, moving on, we also then have a reflected light source shining up from the ground, and that we can see here in the sort of more gray light shining up at the bottom of her chin there, going into her jaw, bottom of her ears, even the bottom of her hair picks up some of this reflected light. Now, any bottom surfaces that you feel would pick up this will get this bottom reflected light treatment. That's secondary. This is bottom reflected light. There's bottom reflected light on her earring. You don't see the left-hand side secondary light because it's very similar to the color of her earrings, but you do see the key light in the form of that highlight. So there you have it, more or less in a nutshell, three-point lighting with the example of Kami over here. And I do hope that this has been very useful to you. I will see you guys in the next lesson.